After returning from a week-long international trip, I was surprised when my mother-in-law, Grace, called me. Her voice had an unusual tone of triumph, and she mentioned something about a $40,000 windfall that we had apparently saved. Her statement left me confused. As a freelance jewelry designer, I do have a savings account for emergencies, but I certainly hadn't stashed away that kind of money recently. Plus, I always kept my bank card with me, and no one else had access to withdraw such a significant amount. Grace then casually said over the phone, "He gave it to me, so I took it from the sideboard drawer. You guys are doing well, so it's fine." Her words stunned me. Before I could ask her to explain, she quickly thanked me and hinted at relying on me for financial support in the future, then abruptly hung up. I was left utterly bewildered. What money was she talking about? Where did this $40,000 come from? Or go? When my husband Thomas returned home later, he cleared up the mystery. Thankfully, it was just a misunderstanding. Still, I couldn't shake off the strange interaction. A month later, things took a frustrating turn. Grace started bombarding me with phone calls. At first, I ignored them, thinking it wasn't urgent. But when I glanced at my phone and saw over 55 missed calls, I knew I couldn't avoid her anymore. I finally picked up the phone, and the moment I did, Grace's voice erupted in anger. She accused me of ignoring her and acted as if she was the victim. Her tone made it clear that she believed she had been wronged. From my perspective, however, this was simply the fallout of her own assumptions. Let me explain a bit about my life. My name is Jessica, and I'm a 37-year-old freelance jewelry designer. I love my work, but it keeps me incredibly busy. My husband Thomas and I are also trying to start a family, but balancing my growing business with my personal life is overwhelming. Thomas used to work in a stable corporate job, but a few years ago, as my business started to take off, he decided to leave his position and join me full-time. His skills in management have been invaluable in helping our business flourish. In the early days of our marriage, my jewelry gigs were sporadic, and we relied on Thomas's steady paycheck. But as my designs gained recognition, our roles shifted. Thomas now helps manage everything from contracts to operations. We've even secured partnerships with prestigious international brands, which has transformed our lives, but also brought new challenges. One of those challenges is dealing with Thomas's mother, Grace. She lives alone in the family home and often views our lifestyle through a distorted lens. To her, our hard work and professional obligations look like indulgent luxury. "You two are always living so lavishly. I'm jealous," she would say, misunderstanding the nature of our expenses. For example, as part of my job, I often attend high-end product launches and networking dinners with executives. Grace, however, sees these events as leisure outings rather than work obligations. Her envy frequently leads to financial requests. Once, she told me, "I'm planning to throw a party for my friends soon. Can you give me some money for it?" While it might seem like we could afford such things easily, the truth is that maintaining our business image involves significant costs, and our budget is tightly managed. Despite explaining this to Grace repeatedly, her requests became more persistent. She would often say things like, "You're always dressed so beautifully and eating at fancy places. I envy you." Her sarcasm and jealousy made it clear she didn't understand the sacrifices behind our apparent success. While I often refused her requests, Thomas took a different approach. If giving her a little money keeps her quiet, then it's worth it, he'd argue. For him, it was easier to offer small financial help to maintain peace rather than deal with the disruptions her complaints might cause. Unfortunately, this approach only encouraged Grace. Her demands started to escalate over time, and her perception of our financial situation became more unrealistic. Living this way has been a balancing act, not just with our careers but also with managing family dynamics. While Thomas and I work hard to build a successful business and prepare for the future, Grace seems to see us as an endless source of financial support. Little did I know, her assumptions would soon lead to even bigger misunderstandings. Recently, Grace expressed a desire for a new dress to wear to an upcoming gathering. She even came over to our place to pester Thomas about it. "Wouldn't a two-piece suit work instead?" Thomas suggested, trying to steer her towards something more practical. But Grace wasn't having it. She argued that while there might be cheaper options, what she wanted was a high-end outfit. I tried to explain that her choice was unnecessarily expensive, but she immediately countered, saying, "It's a fancy party. I can't be the only one there in old clothes." To make matters worse, she insisted she needed a matching handbag to go with the outfit, leaving Thomas and me completely exasperated. To help manage her frequent requests, Thomas had previously set up a credit card in Grace's name for her personal expenses. Initially, she went overboard with her spending, and Thomas had to caution her about sticking to reasonable limits. He asked her to let us know before making significant purchases, but Grace continued her pattern of extravagant spending as if the card had no limits. One day, Grace proudly told us, "I discovered an exquisite ring and couldn't resist buying it. But I regret not informing you beforehand. The bill was quite high." This left Thomas and me in a tough spot. Her unrestrained spending was becoming unsustainable for us. "If this continues, maybe it's best to take back the card," I suggested to Thomas. Even though the card was in Grace's name, Thomas was responsible for paying the bills. Grace seemed to view the card as a bottomless resource, not understanding that every purchase had to be paid for out of our pockets. Recognizing the need for better control, Thomas decided to set a spending limit on her card to curb her expenses. This did not sit well with Grace. One day, she stormed into our house, visibly upset. "What the heck is going on? I couldn't pay for my shopping yesterday."
"Why did you limit my card?" she demanded.
We explained that her excessive spending was putting a strain on our finances, and setting a limit was necessary to manage it. "But it's still enough for your needs, right?" Thomas asked, trying to maintain peace. Grace was unimpressed. "You two still dress up, go to fancy places, and spend money on all sorts of things. How is what I'm doing any different?" she argued. She saw our professional obligations, like attending product launches and high-profile events, as nothing more than fun and leisure. "It's part of our job, Grace," I tried to explain. "If that's a job, then what I'm doing isn't any different," she snapped. "It's unfair that you two get to enjoy all the fun while I'm left behind." Her misunderstanding of our work only made the situation more frustrating. While it's true that our business involves attending glamorous events, these aren't just social outings. They're necessary for building relationships and maintaining our professional image. Despite her protests, setting a limit on Grace's credit card helped calm things down for a while. Occasionally, she would visit and complain to Thomas about feeling left out, but overall, things seemed more manageable. As the year progressed, an exciting opportunity came our way. A well-known foreign brand approached us with a proposal to expand our business by relocating overseas. The idea was thrilling. It could elevate my career as a jewelry designer to new heights and open doors to becoming one of the top-tier designers in the industry. Thomas, ever supportive and forward-thinking, encouraged me to take the leap. "This is a chance we can't pass up," he said with enthusiasm. We both agreed that moving abroad was the right decision for our business and our future. However, one major concern loomed over us: Grace. Given her past behavior, we knew there was a high chance she would insist on coming with us. The thought of managing her demands while adapting to a new country was daunting, to say the least. When we finally broke the news to Grace that we were planning to move overseas, her reaction was exactly what we had feared. "I want to come too," she declared without hesitation, assuming our relocation was going to be some sort of endless vacation. Thomas tried to explain gently, "We're moving for work, Grace. It won't be as leisurely as you think." But Grace was skeptical. "You're trying to trick me," she said, narrowing her eyes. "You plan to live even more lavishly over there, and you don't want me around to see it." Her response left us speechless. While we were excited about this new chapter in our lives, we realized it wouldn't be without its challenges, especially when it came to handling Grace's unrealistic expectations. Grace accused us of lying about our plans to move overseas. "You're not moving there permanently," she insisted. "You'll come back after your work is done." I tried to reassure her. "That's true. We're not planning to stay forever. We'll come back after our project is finished," I said, hoping to ease her concerns. But Grace wasn't convinced. You're just saying that to calm me down. You're planning to leave me behind, aren't you? She retorted, her voice filled with suspicion. Exhausted from the repetitive argument, Thomas and I felt drained. Finally, Thomas suggested a compromise. Okay, we can't take you with us, but how about we pay for a week-long trip for you instead? Grace's mood instantly shifted. Really? Are you sure? She asked, her face lighting up. We'll cover your flight and hotel, but you'll have to manage your other expenses, Thomas clarified. Grace seemed pleased, at least for the moment, and we were relieved to have temporarily resolved the issue. However, the peace didn't last long. A few days later, while Thomas was busy finalizing arrangements for our move, Grace dropped by unexpectedly. Hey Jessica, I've been thinking, I want to shop over there too. Can you give me some money for that? She asked, looking hopeful. What about the card Thomas gave you? I replied, knowing she already had a designated credit card for personal expenses. Her face fell. That's the thing. Thomas took it away from me the other day, she admitted. It appeared Thomas had confiscated the card after she overspent again. Anticipating the complications of managing her spending with international currency rates, he had decided it was best to cut her access altogether. I don't have that kind of money on hand, I told her firmly. I can't give you anything without Thomas's approval. Can you ask him? It's no use asking him. That's why I'm coming to you, she pressed, her frustration growing. She raised her voice, but I stood my ground. Despite her persistence, I couldn't give her what she wanted. Eventually, Grace did go on a 12-day trip abroad. I assumed Thomas had managed to fund it somehow, though he hadn't mentioned the details to me. When she returned, she called me, her voice brimming with excitement. I'm back. It was amazing. I had so much fun, she gushed, sharing stories of sightseeing and fancy dinners without me even asking. She continued, oh, and I bought so many souvenirs that I couldn't fit them in my suitcase. I had them shipped here instead. I can't wait for them to arrive. That's nice, I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite feeling overwhelmed by her enthusiasm. Thanks to the money you saved up, I had a blast, she exclaimed, catching me off guard. Saved up money?
What are you talking about?
I asked, alarmed. I had no recollection of setting aside money for her. I found it in the sideboard drawer in your house, she replied casually. It was $40,000. I took it and used it. Her words left me stunned. Why would such a large amount of cash be stashed in a drawer? And how could she think it was okay to take it? Trying to stay calm, I said, Grace, taking money from our house without permission is theft, even if you're family. Do you understand how serious this is? Grace shrugged off my words. That's why I'm telling you now. I used it. Consider it a post-fact report, she said unapologetically. I have no idea where this money came from, but if you took it and spent it without telling anyone, that's a crime, I explained. And if Thomas had set it aside for something important, it's even worse. Grace didn't seem fazed. You two live so extravagantly. Why can't I have a little of that? Think of it as doing a favor for your parent. It's not a big deal, right? She rationalized, her tone filled with entitlement. It's one thing to ask for help, I replied, still in disbelief. But taking money without asking is not okay. I'm glad you enjoyed your trip, but I'll have to discuss this with Thomas when he gets back. Grace, undeterred, said confidently, Thomas will understand. After all, I'm his mother and $40,000 isn't much to him. That evening, when Thomas returned home, he seemed troubled. Jessica, do you know about the money I left in the sideboard drawer? He asked urgently. What money? I asked, already suspecting the worst. 15 days ago, I withdrew $40,000 from the bank for an urgent payment, but now it's gone. Keeping such a large sum in the drawer was careless, but I needed it readily available for a transaction. Do you know anything about it? It all clicked. Grace's earlier call, her stories about the trip, and her casual mention of taking money. It was Thomas's money she had spent. Thomas, I said, Grace called me today to thank us for $40,000 and said she had a great time on her trip. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to frustration as he realized what had happened. She took the money? He asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The situation had escalated far beyond the usual family drama, and we both knew it wasn't going to be easy to resolve. I sat down, piecing together everything Thomas had shared. The $40,000 Grace had taken was Thomas's, but I still didn't fully understand its purpose. Thomas, why did you withdraw such a large sum in cash? We usually handle payments through bank transfers, especially for business. Why the sudden shift to cash? I asked, still trying to grasp the bigger picture. Thomas sighed, the weariness clear in his voice. He began to explain, after I reduced the limit on Grace's credit card, she started secretly borrowing money from various sources, consumer finance cards, credit cards, ones she opened without telling us. When I discovered how much debt she'd accumulated, I took away all her cards to stop the spiral. I withdrew cash to settle her debts directly, bypassing the banking system to keep our business accounts clean. I wanted to handle this discreetly, especially since we're moving abroad and won't be around to help her manage things anymore. He paused before continuing. This was meant as a farewell gesture, my way of tying up loose ends before we leave. But Grace didn't use the money for what it was intended. Instead, she blew it on that trip. Hearing this, I felt a mix of anger and frustration. Thomas's intentions had been noble, but Grace's actions had undermined his efforts. As I processed the situation, a month passed, and we were deep in preparations for our overseas move. During that time, Grace's calls became more frequent and impossible to ignore. When I finally answered one of her calls, her voice was filled with desperation. Why haven't you been answering my calls? I've tried so many times, she cried, sounding close to tears. I'm sorry, Grace. I've been caught up with packing for the move. What's going on? I asked, trying to stay calm and give her a chance to explain. It's everything, Jessica. They're asking for payments every day. It's too much, she confessed, her voice breaking. Have you tried contacting Thomas about this? I asked, hoping she'd sought his help first. He's blocking my calls. I can't get through to him at all. Jessica, you're my only hope now. Please help me, she pleaded, her desperation evident. It was then I realized how deeply Grace's financial recklessness had trapped her. With Thomas cutting off her access and refusing to engage, she was turning to me as her last resort. The situation had grown more complicated than I had imagined. When Thomas returned home, I relayed Grace's pleas to him. He listened, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. I had planned to sort this out before we left, Jessica. But she squandered the chance I gave her. That money was meant to settle her debts, and instead, she used it for a luxury vacation. What else can I do? He said, his voice cold. His frustration was justified, but I still felt uneasy about blocking Grace entirely. Yet, with our business expansion underway and our financial resources already stretched thin, there was no room to take on Grace's burden, especially after she had misused the funds. Despite my lingering guilt, I followed Thomas's lead and blocked her number, focusing on our move. As the chaos of packing consumed my days, another shocking piece of news surfaced. Grace had sold her house, the family home where Thomas had grown up, in an attempt to manage her mounting debts. But even after selling the property, the money wasn't enough to cover everything she owed. The realization that the home was gone was devastating. Thomas, the family home is gone. Are you okay with that? I asked, sensing the sadness he was trying to mask. He shook his head, his voice tinged with sorrow. How can I be okay with it? That house was where I grew up, where so many memories were made. But there's nothing we can do now. It's her choice, and we're not in a position to help anymore. Losing the house felt like losing a piece of Thomas's childhood, a profound and irreversible loss. It was heartbreaking to see him wrestle with these emotions while knowing there was no way to salvage the situation. The house, a symbol of stability and family, was gone, and with it, a part of Grace's ability to recover from her financial chaos. As we prepared to leave for our new life overseas, the weight of what had transpired lingered heavily. Grace's actions had strained our relationships, depleted resources, and left Thomas with the painful realization that he could no longer shield his mother from the consequences of her own choices. The move promised a fresh start, but it was bittersweet, knowing we were leaving behind not just our old life, but also unresolved family turmoil. The loss of a family home is a profound experience, one I had endured earlier in life, when my parents' house was taken away. Watching Thomas go through a similar ordeal brought back those emotions, but his situation felt even more complicated. Unlike my past, Thomas wasn't just losing the physical place where his earliest memories were formed, he was losing a deep emotional sanctuary. To make it harder, his mother, Grace, was still alive, a painful reminder of the circumstances that led to this loss. It's hard to describe the feeling of losing a family home. It's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about losing a piece of one's identity and the comfort of knowing there's a place to return to, a constant amidst life's changes. The house becomes a symbol of security, memories, and history, something Thomas could no longer hold on to. The absence of that anchor weighed heavily on both of us as we prepared to leave for a new chapter in a different country. Grace, now living in a modest apartment, faced a stark new reality. Her days were consumed by managing her debts and working part-time to stay afloat. For someone her age, finding work was not only challenging but often exhausting and unrewarding. The life she now led was a drastic shift from the unchecked spending and financial freedom she once enjoyed. While it was hard not to feel sympathy for her, it was tempered by the understanding that her current situation was a result of her financial recklessness. Life has a way of teaching us that actions have consequences, and Grace's case reaffirmed that hard truth. No matter your age or stage in life, financial responsibility is crucial. Her struggles served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the importance of planning and restraint, even when life seems comfortable. Meanwhile, our new life abroad began to flourish. The move had propelled our business into the international spotlight, far exceeding our expectations. Inquiries and offers poured in from all over the world. Each new email or call brought exciting opportunities for expansion and collaboration, but it also demanded more of our time and energy. The thrill of success was undeniable, yet it consumed our lives entirely. Days blurred into nights as we juggled time zones, cultural nuances, and an endless stream of tasks, all to seize this golden opportunity. Our personal lives, however, bore the weight of this relentless pursuit of professional growth. The dream of expanding our family, something Thomas and I had talked about for years, seemed increasingly distant. We told ourselves we'd revisit that dream once things settled down, but deep down, we knew that the demands of our work wouldn't ease anytime soon. Thomas felt the strain acutely, balancing roles that ranged from logistics to client management. As partners in life and business, we both struggled to align our professional goals with our personal desires. We often found ourselves asking, how do we make room for the life we want, while navigating the pressures of the life we've built? Sometimes I would pause to look out the window of our apartment. The view of the sprawling cityscape was breathtaking. Neon lights blurred into the night sky, reflecting the blur of our own lives. This city, vibrant and relentless, was now our home. Yet it stood in stark contrast to the quiet, familiar streets we had left behind. The life we were building here was filled with promise, but also came with challenges we hadn't anticipated. It was exciting, but it was daunting. Amidst the excitement and chaos of our new chapter, my thoughts often drifted back to Grace and the lessons her situation held for us. Her financial recklessness and its consequences served as a stark reminder of how deeply intertwined our choices are with our futures. Every decision we make, whether personal or professional, shapes not only our immediate circumstances, but also the legacy we leave behind. As I reflected on this, I realized the importance of balance. Our drive for success couldn't come at the expense of the relationships that defined us. While our business achievements brought us pride and recognition, they weren't the only markers of a meaningful life. Building this new phase meant finding ways to nurture both our dreams and the connections that mattered most. Thomas and I resolved to approach this chapter with mindfulness, striving to maintain the delicate balance between ambition and personal fulfillment. After all, success isn't just about reaching the top, it's about the journey and the people who walk it with you.